In this video, we're going to discuss how to run a course completion history report in Relias, which will show you users who have and have not completed a particular course, whether that's a module or a training plan. Now there's lots of different kind of reports in Relias, so we're just going to focus on this one today, which is probably the most common report that you will have to run. So if we log into Relias and we click on the reports section of the menu bar here, we'll come to this page and we're going to click on module enrollments and completions, which is the upper left box. And then you have these options. So we want course completion history, which is the only one with this little icon next to it. So that makes it kind of easy to remember. So if we click course completion history, it'll bring us into these filter options. So I'm going to go through these one by one. Filter by hierarchy, you really don't need to worry about. Filter by modules or training plans. So first we have to ask ourselves the question, do we want to see a report for a module or a training plan? Well, let's say that you have a training plan with 5 different modules. If you want to run a report to see what staff have completed the entire training plan, all 5 modules, then you want to run a training plan report. If you only want to see a report that shows staff who have completed module number 1, then you just want a module report. So I'm going to show you both very briefly, but we'll add a training plan report. So if I leave it on module and click modules, you'll see it defaults to every single module in Relias. And a really quick way to filter that down is to change all owners to St. Joseph Center Scranton, and then we only see modules that were created by St. Joseph Center. If you come up here, there's a search, so you can search for whatever, and that makes things a little easier. But I'm not going to add a module. I'm going to add a training plan for reasons that will become clear in a little bit. So for the training plans, it doesn't give you the same filter options, but you can still search. So I'm going to add this training plan that we created in previous videos. So I just hit the checkbox there. Then I hit add, and you'll see once it's added, it turns gray, and we can X out of here. You can add as many modules or training plans as you want. Now, if you remember, we set Jane to have completed this training module, but Mark has not yet completed it. So the first thing I want to do, I'm kind of going to ignore filter 3 and filter 4. We're going to leave filter 3 totally blank and leave filter 4 at its default, which is course status completed and all learners. I'm not going to touch anything, and I'm going to click Run Report. And it might take a minute here, but you'll see, okay, perfect. So completed on time, and if we come down here to the data, you'll see Jane Tester completed the CPR First Aid course on September 28th, 2021. And we can see it was marked complete by me. All right. Now this doesn't show us that Mark has not completed the course. So if you run a report and you realize, this isn't the data that I wanted, you don't have to start over. If you come up here and click this Edit Filters button, it basically takes you back. If you hit the back button in your browser, it will bring you back here, but it will clear all the modules and everything. So just click that Edit Filters button, and we can see the First Aid CPR CLA training plan is still added. Now let's say that I want to see all of the users who have been assigned this training, including the ones who didn't complete it. So you might think you can just change the course status to not completed. But I just want to show you what happens if we, first of all, if we come to date type, we can see that we can't click on completed anymore. It just has a date range, and it defaults to 6 months prior to today's date. Now, watch what happens if I run this report. We get this error message saying that no data was found, which doesn't make any sense because we just saw that Jane completed it. The reason that is because if we come down here, the due date range is set to 6 months before today's date. Now, when was the due date for that course? Well, we set it up to auto-enroll users 30 days after their last completion date or 30 days in the future, and we did that on September 28th, which means that the due date for Mark and Jane is October 28th, and we're telling the filter only look for completion that have a due date between April 1st and October 1st, and it's not finding anything because the due date was October 28th. Now that we understand that, let's see how to run a report that'll give us the results we want. So again, course status is set to not completed, which means we should see that we want to see a report that shows that Mark did not complete this training. We know now that the due date is October 28th. So what I'm going to do is click this calendar. I'm just going to set it to October 31st, and I'll click Run Report. And wait a minute. And we can see here, Mark Tester has not completed the report and it's due on the 28th. Excuse me, has not completed the training and it's due on the 28th. So now we know how to run a completion report and a not completion report, but what if we want to see both together? Well, let's click on the Edit Filters button again and go back. And all we have to do now is change the course status to all, and we'll leave the due dates the same. If we were to leave this to the default, April 1st to October 1st, we get the same exact result. We get no data found. So we'll just come back up here and click Run Report. And there we go. If we scroll down, we can see Jane Tester completed it on September 28th. She got a score of 100, and it was marked completed by me, whereas Mark Tester has not started the training, hasn't completed it, and it's also due by October 28th. Now, if you wanted to export this data, you can do that. You can click this export button here, and let's just say we want to export it as an Excel file. So we'll go ahead and do that and just wait a minute here for that to pop up. But I would caution you to avoid exporting data for the purposes of tracking externally. So in other words, you don't want to export this or run a report and then write this information down on an index card or in a binder or in your own spreadsheet, because Relias does all the tracking for you. So the purpose of these reports is not, oh, let me run a report so I can use my own tracking system. Relias replaces that tracking system. This is your new tracking system. But we can see the same information here that we just saw on the website. So we'll close out of that. Now, one other thing I want to show, if we go back to Edit Filters real quick, let's say we know that this is a recurring training and it's due every 2 years. So let's say it's 2 years in the future and Jane's due date is coming up, but we want to see how many times she's completed the CPR and on what date it was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this calendar here and I'm going to change it to October of 2023, and we'll just do October 31st again. So if we think, if this was due on October 28th, 2021 for Jane, it would then be due sometime around October of 2023, 2 years in the future. So we'll just leave that as it is and click Run Report. And then we can see the data changes slightly. And if we scroll down here, okay, so Jane completed it on the 28th, right? But then we can see that, well, she has to have it done within 2 years. So now her due date has changed. So originally the due date was October 28th, 2021. But she completed it a month early, basically. She completed it September 28th. So she doesn't have until October 28th, 2023. She has to do it within those 2 years. So now her due date has automatically become 1 month earlier, September 28th, 2023. Okay? And because Mark hasn't started his, the system hasn't assigned a due date for 2 years in the future because it doesn't know when or if Mark is going to complete this training. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, let me go back to Edit Filters. Let's say you have a report that you run a lot. Well, actually, let me back up. Filter by user attributes. We'll talk about this really quick. If you have a training that is company-wide, for example, and you want to see only users in the CLA department who have completed this training, you can click on the departments here, and then, we'll click Community Residential. From there you can filter by group home, so okay, I only want this group home, and maybe I only want the direct support professionals in that group home. So I can click here. So this filter by user attributes is very powerful. Now, you may not need to use this at all, as I alluded to earlier in the video, if, for example, you have a training that is specific to CLA, and you just want to see everyone in the CLA department who has completed it. Well, it wasn't assigned to other users, so you don't have to filter by department. But if you have a training that is St. Joe's company-wide, then you'll want to filter by department so you don't see people in the ICF or people in CSS who have completed the training. Now I'm going to X out of here, and I'm going to change this due date back to October 31st of 2021. Now let's say that I run this report fairly frequently, or a report similar to this. Well, I don't want to come in here every time and have to reset up all these fields. So if you want to save the report, instead of clicking Run Report, click Save My Report. And then you have to give it a name. So let's say CLA 2021 first aid / CPR. And hit Save. Okay, great. So now it's going to run the report for us and show us the information that we would expect to see, which is that Jane completed this training and Mark did not. Now how do we find this report again? Well, if we go back to reports, you'll see it defaults to create reports, and it gives you all these options that we just went over. But if you click up here where it says saved reports, now we can see the report we just saved, CLA 2021 First Aid CPR. And if we click that, it runs it for us. We don't have to do anything. So I'm going to go back to save. The other thing I should add is, once again, if you need to edit something, click the Edit Filters button. You can change the due date, for example. So click back to save reports now. Let's say that you want to get a weekly or a monthly email that runs this report for you. So every single week you can keep track of, who needs to do their CPR, who needs to do this training. Well, if you click the little mail icon over here, what you can do is you can select a frequency. So let's say I want a weekly report and I want to get it every Tuesday. Then select your file format. So I'll just select Excel, and you can change the subject and the message to whatever you want. So I'd recommend changing the subject to something a little less generic other than course completion history, because you might have several of these reports running, so you don't want to get 3 reports that say have course completion history as the subject. So we'll just say 2021 CLA First Aid CPR. Okay? Now, what you have to do is come down here and add users. And just like a lot of things where you have to add users, you'll see a list of every single St. Joe's employee. So you could search for yourself if you wanted to add, or you could come down here to Filters, Departments, and I'll go to the Test Department. And you'll see a message here that says only users with valid email addresses can be selected. So that's why we're not seeing Jane and Mark here, because they don't have an email address associated with their account. So I'm going to clear these filters, and I'm just going to search for me, and hey, there I am. So I click the checkbox, click Add Users, and you can see that I am added here. And if I click Save, that's all I have to do. And now every week on a Tuesday, I will get a course completion history report emailed directly to me. So hopefully this video has been helpful. I know it's a bit on the longer side. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will be happy to assist in any way we can.